common question many people have is, what else can I do for my shoulder pain? I've tried everything and nothing is working. This can be very common, especially depending on the treatment method that you're using to address the shoulder pain. When we think about shoulders, we have to think of it similar, but not exactly just like the hip, meaning it's a ball and socket joint. The ball, the humerus, actually fits into the socket, the acetabulum of the shoulder. So depending on where that sits and the forces and pressure there will determine the motion or lack of that you have going through any kind of activities, whether it's just general day-to-day stuff, or if you're adding weights, going to the gym, well, then there's an increased force with something out of position. So we have to think a little bit deeper. We have to look at what's going on, the symptoms you're experiencing at that site. Maybe it's in the front, the side, the top, or the back, or deep in the actual socket itself. Or we have to look at what's going on around it. So not just the symptoms, but what's actually leading up to the pressure point in the first place. A lot of it has to do with your hand dominance, meaning which pattern that you favor the most, which position you're in mostly throughout the day, or the activities that you're going through. But then we look at it as a whole. How is this driving you into certain positions, and also the alignment of the surrounding bones, structures around it. If you don't have great alignment, well, it's always going to be offset at the humerus, the ball and socket joint, that's causing that extra pressure, and that's the muscles around there tightening up and not having the ability to actually go in there and fire off and do their job in the first place. So let's break it down. First off, let's look at your hand dominance, right versus left-handed. You're going to continually go through different patterns subconsciously, not even realizing it, just because it's your dominant pattern, causing you to favor one side more than the other. This already activates the nervous system, causing you to either want to activate certain muscle groups more than others, or deactivate certain ones, not leading to that extra strength training that they should be getting. So what ends up happening is you favor one side, continue to go into that position. We have to look a little bit deeper though, not just what's happening at the shoulder, but what's happening around the area. So we think about this, a lot of times the pelvis gets offset, then there's this counter rotation of your rib cage. So there's a counter rotation of the rib cage. And then if you think of the back side, your shoulder blade, which has a lot to do with where this humerus, that your arm bone fits into that socket, is if it's offset, well, again, it's going to keep it in a compressed position. So again, backtracking, hips are off, pelvis gets off, meaning you have a little bit of rotation, counter rotation of your rib cage. Those rib cage, think of it as my fingers, they press out because they get rotated, then your scapula, shoulder blades on top, get pushed out as well. So keeps it pressure points, certain poor areas that actually have poor contraction of the muscles because they're not lined up, and also extra pressure to that shoulder joint. So to keep it simple, we want to go there and look at what's going on in your shoulder, but also look around there. So you start to open up these other areas, increase the mobility of the surrounding joints, the structure around it, the framework, so you have a better position. Again, if I'm always kept in a forward position, there's always going to be more tension and force here. That's when I try to lift my arm and there's not the motion. I can't offset that pressure to the surrounding areas. So being smart and being strategic is the way to actually fix that shoulder pain. You may have tried a lot of things, but when you actually put it all together and stack them, that's where the actual results come into play. So it's looking at the surrounding areas, the position, the alignment of all the joints themselves. Then you look at the muscles, how can they activate around the area, and then that's when you can go into your strengthening and stability phase. Many times people skip the mobility and movement phase, not realizing this is the actually most important piece. You're going to gain the strength because the muscles will come back and line up. But first off, you got to get those joints back into position, get those joints receptors firing, feed that nervous system, and get things activated to address that shoulder pain.